younger, a leading expert in caring leadership, excuse me, and active listening. Good afternoon, Heather. How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully. So good to see you again.
Thank you. Well, if you like, we are going to start the interview, and this is the first question. Can you tell us about your journey into caring leadership and active listening, and what drew you to this topic?
Yes. I would have to say, I mean, I'm not going to go way back like I do when I like on my talk, but I will at least say this, that I was going through a merger where there were 5 companies that were merging together, and the culture was really bad. And I saw it and I felt it. People were like, everybody was just like feeling not very trusted. They didn't feel like they could trust people. They were very afraid of what was going to happen. And I, again, felt the same way. And so I went to the head of HR and I said to her, we got to do something about our lack of engagement, about our lack of trust. And she said, you're right. You should go do something about that. And I went, wait, why me? Why me? I wasn't in HR. I was in customer experience. And she said, I said, okay, fine. Okay, I took her up on that idea because I already had been kind of like a culture ambassador. Like I've always been like the voice for customers and the voice for people. I just have always been that way. I am a lawyer by training. And so like being the advocate is a very natural role for me. And so I created an employee engagement council and I brought people around the table who really like they already showed me that they were interested in figuring out how to make it all work and the merger, like be successful. And so we started to do different things, creative things to break down the walls of mistrust, to kind of create more connection with people. And it was in those moments that I realized I had my calling. Like I realized I was supposed to be kind of a catalyst to bring
Mm-hmm.
the voices of the people, like customers,
Mm-hmm.
employees, back to leaders who, like executive leaders, who really um, control the purse strings, control the money, control the resources, control the pockets. So they control everything at work. And I said, I am the person to do this with my training and my abilities to kind of work with people and things, right? And so that's kind of like how that journey started, is I was in the middle of it. And then there was a layoff that took place, and I was one of 200 people laid off, which is why I spoke about this at Agile, because
Mm-hmm.
Agile Alliance, because I said, yeah, I've been there. I know what it is to go through a layoff. It's painful. But in that process is when I discovered my calling to do this work and to because in those times when there's mergers, reorganizations, new leadership, things like that, there's just so much, there's confusion, there's anxiety, there's pain, there's miscommunication. And so there's always going to be a need for someone like me or like you all, because this is what agile people do. Like I said, being the voice for other
Mm-hmm.
people back to the business. And so for me, it just became a natural thing. It was obvious. I should be the one who helps them listen. I should be the one that helps them show care, because nobody really feels care for during all of that change.
Yeah, it could be, or it is very hard, no? Isn't it?
Mhm. Yes.
Mm. And what or who has been the biggest influence on your professional development?
Well, I have to say, probably my grandmother. It's an interesting mix, because I think you remember me telling the story of my background of being, white and Jewish and Black and Christian, and that grandmother who kind of kept me in the outside and I couldn't go to different events. Well, that same grandmother is also the same one who kind of always talked to me about being a lawyer, and always talked to me about keeping my head up, and always talked to me about staying strong. And so I think like a lot of who I am, whether I know it, I mean, I do know it now, but when I was younger, I didn't know how much of an impact she had on me, kind of just how I
Mm-hmm.
show up professionally and how I think of myself and how I keep going, going, going. It has a lot to do with her. So it's very complicated. So it's kind of the person who excluded me on one hand also uplifted me on another and allowed me to see a bigger world, because my parents didn't really they didn't really like say, oh, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to law school, you're going to do this, you're going to like that. They didn't do that. It was mostly her who did that. So I did that. I took that journey because I wanted to be like seen as more worthy. I wanted to be seen as good enough. And that's why I took the journey. And then I ended up, then over time, again, I think it was just a combination of when you're at a place where maybe you always struggle to not quite feel good enough, that you just, for me, some people it might be debilitating, or let me just say, it might stop people from doing something because it's so overwhelming. But for me, it was a driver to keep focusing forward. Yeah.
Interesting. You have to have some certain skills to do the things that you do, or our leaders need to have some skills. We'd like to know if you have done any analysis about past leaders, the ones who are right now among us, or the future leaders. What differences do you see in them, or what are the skills you think are essential in this type of leaders?
Yes, I haven't done, let's say, a longitudinal study of, going back years and years, or, something like that. I haven't done anything like that. But what I can tell you, so having been managing people with a variety of leaders, and also coaching other leaders and things like that for 20-something years, I think that before, what they thought they needed was much more about task alignment. Strategic is important, but task alignment, and I would say tactical abilities, and more like financial metrics and like those kinds of things, which you still need that. But what's happening now, and I believe what's going to happen, especially with AI, is there's going to be more and more of a need. So there's going to be this time where we're very happy and ooh, AI, and it's all this great thing. And there's going to be kind of like what happened to us with COVID. So in COVID, or COVID-19, during the pandemic, we became distant, and it was hard. And then we kind of wrapped around family and friends only, just very close. And we became like in our cocoon. We weren't talking to one another really, except for in our little cocoon. And so then we came out of it, and it's almost like you're in the dark and you come into the sunshine, and then you see, oh wait, there's people, there are other humans. And then we start to see, oh my gosh, I missed these people. I missed the humans, but besides just my family. And I think that's what's going to happen even in the professional sense, is that we're going to see the leaders that are already they already are having to change, and they're already having to evolve to be more emotionally intelligent, to really lean in with more empathy. And like I talk about listening, they're going to have to do that more and more. But when we're going through this, yay, AI, generative, all these things, right? When we're going through that, we aren't going to really know that we're missing the things until we really have missed it. Like we've missed the mark. So I do think there's going to be a kind of there'll be an uptick. It may level out now. And I think there's going to be like this uptick after we get a big dose of reality that no matter what we do or we create from a technology perspective, there's always going to have to be the need to have the human-to-human interaction, and managers are going to have to like meet people where they're at with all of their, they're going to have to be more somebody who can be agile and also help their team members become more resilient and help them overcome obstacles, even obstacles in adopting technology. They're going to have to, and only way to do that is to recognize what they're seeing, to pause and be with the people, and then help them to kind of overcome the obstacles and the things that are right there in their path. So that's what I see happening.
Okay. And what do you think is the most important thing to changing in the mindset of or a culture in a company?
I mean, it does have to start from the top because, I think you all know this, but people who are in Agile, I'm so similar. The work I do is so similar to the work you all do. It may not be focused, a lot on the technology adoption, but it absolutely is about change management. And it is about how do we talk to the people up here and make sure we bring the voices up here so that, it includes more people, so that's a very kind of big shell that we all work in. And I think that, when we think about culture, I think it's going to have to start up here because I've tried it down here. It gets up to about right here. And then there's like this shell that just, right, you can't. So it has to start here. I think it's super important. I also do deeply believe that while I need to show them data, I mean, like they need to know data, the why, how is it going to, connect to what they need from a stakeholder, stakeholder advancement or stakeholder value. They need to know that. At the same time, I think that we have to get in their hearts and in their guts with it as well. So there's going to be people who will fight against that because there might be very numbers, procedure oriented kind of people, which is fine. We need those people all the time in the world. But those same people often are the ones in power, and we have to help them understand whether it's in their language, like in their own way of understanding, like how do they take in information? But we have to get it in their heart. Like it has to be in their heart and in their gut for them to understand why the change is so important to the people who make the business move forward. They just do. I mean,
So
even if you look at tech, it's the people who program the tech, who set up it's still people. And we have to let them know that. So I think starting here, giving it the data to them or giving them the information the way they need it. And then at the same time, penetrating the heart constantly with storytelling, real people, maybe telling their stories, things like that are going to be important.
So that would be the advice you give to these people, the ones who are beginning to change this mindset, or anything else?
Yeah. The one I think that if we're talking about people like us who are trying to help the people change the mindset, that's the advice I'd give. If it's I'm talking to a COO or a CEO and they want to know how should I change my culture, I'm going to say they need to act. They need to be the change they're seeking. So they have to know the behaviors and then adopt the right behaviors and then demonstrate them consistently. And then recognize, validate the behaviors that they're seeing, and then enforce behaviors that are counter to what they want, right? So there's two different sets of advice. It depends on who I'm talking to. But if it's to people like you and me, I'm going to say, tell them the way they need to be told. So like talk to them in the way that they receive it the best. Find a way to penetrate their heart so that it becomes more purpose-filled and not just a task completion. It's purpose-centered. And that's what I would probably say would be the thing to tell for us.
So it's very important the way we talk with them, the storytelling we use to penetrate to their hearts. And
yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about your book, The Art of Active Listening. Here you talk about the cycle of active listening. Tell us something a little about it, please.
As you know, that cycle has a lot in it. So I'm not going to go too deep into the cycle, but one thing I will say is the cycle came out of, it wasn't just like a whim, like, oh, I think of this idea, here's a cycle. It was something that I had used over a span of 25 years, working with employees, being a leader of teams, working with customers, in lots of different types of sectors. And after I had done things well and I did things not well, and I saw other people doing things well and not well, that's what made me codify or, put this thing together that would simplify the steps they could take to really make sure that people felt heard and seen. Okay. So I just want to say that, like, when I talk about the cycle or the cycle in this book, it wasn't just like this made up construct that never had been validated. It is a validated, like, copyrighted, like, piece of thing that we work from. That's why I was trying to teach this to more and more people around the world. So the cycle of active listening, and that book on active listening, which the cycle is at the center of it, it is a step-by-step approach to active listening. And there are 5 steps in it. And what happens sometimes is that we think that we can kind of go one step and then go to the last step, kind of like reading the first chapter of a book and then going to the conclusion. But what happens is we miss all of this stuff in between that sometimes we do naturally, and sometimes we miss the mark. Oftentimes there's sometimes we like do all the things not consistently. So it's trying to say, if you could see this, have that cycle in front of you, and you could say, okay, with this coworker or this direct report or this manager or this customer, when they asked me, when I had the conversation with them in my call with them, and they asked me to take certain actions, and I went to take those actions, did I ever close the loop with them on the action I took on their behalf? Because sometimes what happens is we get so busy in our day-to-day lives, and people are giving us feedback and inputs all the time, and we're acting. And there's 2 things we don't do often. We don't decode, which is slowing down to reflect, to research, to involve more team members. And we aren't closing the loop after we've acted to tell people, by the way, what you asked me to do when we had our conversation the other day, I did it. And, or I didn't quite do it, and it's because of X, Y, Z. Or I was thinking about doing it, but I wanted to talk to you first to tell you what my ideas were about the action I planned to take. How does that sound? Okay, good. Now we go back and forth in a dialogue and we land on the solution. Now I go do the right action, not the assumed action, not the whim action, but the action that's well thought out, that's in a partnership mode. And now I go back after I've taken it, maybe 2 months later, and say, how does that feel now? How does that feel now that I've taken that action based upon our conversation? And the person could say, it's amazing. Thank you so much for that. Or the person could say, it's pretty good. Could be better. Okay, good. Well, what does that mean? And then I continue to go back to the drawing board to take different action, and I come back again. So how does that feel? Is that better now? Oh, it's much better. So the cycle, it's so simple. It really is a simple thing, but it's the idea is to keep at the top of mind. Make sure you're not stepping over one point, because if you do, you won't leave them fully feeling heard and seen. So it just helps everybody in a tidy package understand, if you do these things, you'll leave people feeling this particular way.
Okay. Well, and what about Employee Fanatix? What is it? Why?
Well, I mean, right, after that layoff, so after going back to that layoff story, I started to write on LinkedIn and write. Like, it was therapeutic after a layoff. I was just writing about, how to leave people with dignity after a layoff and different things about workplace culture. And people started to reach out to me and ask me to help their company, like on the customer side, on the employee side. So I decided to create a company because I didn't even think I was going to be consulting. I was just writing because it felt good, because I needed to do something productive after the layoff. And so I created Employee Fanatix, and the whole purpose of it was to help on the culture and engagement side, and to help listen to customers and employees, help corporations do that, and help them use that to action plan and drive forward strategy. And so that's what Employee Fanatix is. We do leadership development, and we do the whole kind of consultative or advisory work for organizations to say, do you don't really know what your customers or employees really want, and let us help you find out what they exactly want and what you should do about it. and let us help you close the loop in a continuous cycle and help you drive forward a better culture, more engagement on both the customer and employee side. So that's what Employee Fanatix is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the art of caring leadership, that the title is very powerful for me. What about this book, Caring Leadership? We always talk about leadership, leading by example, but not caring about leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Why this is so important?
Yeah. The caring, the reason why I decided to create caring, like the art of caring leadership, is it's kind of what you just said. We use care or caring all the time, but it's kind of nebulous or kind of squishy. Like what does that mean exactly? So what I did is taking all the years of like reading thousands of surveys, facilitating focus groups, and then my podcast is called Leadership with Heart. And I interview, hundreds, at this point, over 300 now leaders, to find out kind of why do they choose to be more emotionally intelligent? Like, why do they choose to express care to people? Why is it more of their North Star? It doesn't mean they're perfect. There is no perfect human or perfect leader or manager. There just isn't. No one is. But I was like, I'm so curious. I'm almost like a social scientist. I'm like, super curious. And then tell me about the times when you aren't so great. So I bubbled up like all the good stuff and I synthesized kind of the good stuff. And then I synthesized some of the challenges that all those same people had. And I just put it into the book and came up with those 9 behaviors that are in the book. The 9 behaviors that were, so after all hundreds of people, oh, okay. So it seems to me like these are the 9 things that if you do these things based upon all the surveys I read and all the challenges that employees have. So if you could imagine, just think about this. So you're reading 30,000 employee survey comments. So comments, each of those comments I read personally, and you're in focus groups with so many, like hundreds of employees in different focus groups. And you hear, so all I'm doing is I'm taking it in, right? So I'm hearing all of it. Then I go and I sit with the leaders who then have employees on the other side, but they do a better job than the most leaders do. So now I'm getting a whole like interesting view mix, right? 360 view of an employee's experience. So the Caring Leadership book was the attempt to tell other leaders the 9 behaviors they could go do consistently to create a more positive experience for their team members. That was what I did. So that's what the Caring Leadership book is. And so caring leadership, the difference between regular leadership and caring leadership are twofold, really. One is caring leadership is showing concern and kindness towards those who look to you for guidance in some way. And that does not require a title. So most often we think leadership requires that you are a manager or that you have to be a team leader. And it's not formally required. Although I particularly do want people who have senior titles to get their hands on this. And oftentimes I find that when senior leaders read this, they go, oh, this is so basic. But the problem is, are you consistently practicing these basic behaviors? Because they are basic. But if you aren't practicing them consistently, your people won't feel cared for. They're not going to stay with you. They're not going to do more for you. They just aren't. So that's the reason why I put that book together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what advice would you give to people like me? We are trying to help leaders to be more caring leaders, or maybe some of us could someday be a leader of a team or a company. What advice can you give us?
Yes, and I think it's 2 separate pieces of advice. You probably can imagine, like, nothing is that simple. It's not like you can't. It's not. There's not. I wish I could say there's just one. It all depends on the organization, the hype, the potential of the leader or the leader that's currently in the role, the challenges they currently face. There's a lot of different things. You know this. This is what we do as advisors to organizations, right? So it ends up being not simple. But I would say this: that if you're a leader who wants to be, if you're like us and we're trying to help people be more caring, I think we need to be better at shining lights on different things that are happening in the organization. So we need to share, we need to see when their behaviors are caring behaviors and we see it happen in a meeting, we need to call it out and say, oh my gosh, how you interacted with so-and-so at that meeting was phenomenal. Like you were so good when you did that. And then the person goes, oh, and then you be specific. What I mean by that is when they spoke to you and you and you paid attention and you noticed that they shifted in their chair and you said something like, oh, Edward, is everything okay? I noticed that or something going, did I say something offensive? And you said that in the meeting and it opened up an entire dialogue in the room and you created a safe space. Spectacular. Okay, so we can do those kinds of things because we notice the behaviors and we can say it instead of, because we get quiet, we don't want to say anything. If it's good stuff, call it out, like right there. Or if it's a certain type of leader, go tell them in their office afterward. If it's a behavior that wasn't very good, do that after, behind the scenes, have a meeting and let them know, like, can I give you a piece of advice? I saw something. Are you open to feedback? And so being that really brave, courageous person on the positive side and on the constructive side is, I think, really critical to help them understand. Oftentimes they just aren't aware. There's so much going on. They're just not aware. How can we help them become more aware? I think the second thing on that from our perspective is we need to be the change we're seeking. We need to demonstrate the values ourselves before we can expect others to do the same, before we can hold someone else accountable for doing that. Now, from the person who's already, like, let's say in a manager role, because everybody's a leader. They can't all be a leader if they respond with concern and kindness. If they are a person who is there for other people and help them move forward and uplift others, we can be a leader every day. It doesn't matter about our title. But if you are in a formal role like authority, and those people, I think taking books like this, listening to podcasts, getting a coach, to say, I'm looking to be more caring, to show more compassion. How can I do that? We can't do this whole thing alone. We have to do it as a group. We have to do it together,
Okay, thank you. This interview is finishing. We are we are finishing questions. I have only one. Would you like to say anything to the Agile community in Spain?
Well, I would hope to meet you one day. That's one thing I would love to say.
That could be great.
Yes. And then the other thing is that your impact is very big. It's your positive impact is big. It could be even bigger with a lot of intentionality and understanding the power you have, like the power that's inside of you, to not just like self-direct you, change you, but to help everybody else see the world differently through the lens that you live, because of you are practitioners or you're in the roles. You get to see like more, your view happens to be much more broad and global. You may not know or think that way, but it's true. So how can you help others step outside their own thinking, be that catalyst for thinking differently, thinking bigger, thinking more inclusive, thinking more creatively in this world that's changing rapidly? So just know that you have that power to do that. And I want you to go do it. Go take on that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all. Very kind for, how do you say? Oh, my English. Oh,
That's okay. No.
It has been a pleasure for me to make this interview, and I hope I could see you or be with you again. I had
Yes.
that pleasure already. So thank you very much. We